I moved in on a Thursday afternoon, the kind of gray day that makes everything feel heavier than it is. The city was new to me, noisier, faster, packed with people who all seemed to know where they were going. I, on the other hand, had just dropped 2 suitcases in a stranger's apartment and was wondering if I'd made the worst decision of my life. Kyle met me at the door, shirtless and grinning like we were already friends. His hair was wet, like he'd just stepped out of the shower, and a tattoo I hadn't expected peeked out from under his collarbone. He looked like someone who belonged on a billboard for gym memberships or energy drinks, all muscle and casual confidence. "You must be Matt," he said, holding out a hand that was still damp. "Sorry." Post-shower handshake. I shook it anyway. We hadn't known each other before this. I'd found the listing through a friend of a friend who'd moved abroad and left her room up for grabs. Kyle needed a roommate, and I needed somewhere affordable. That was the extent of the plan. Still, people warned me. "He has no filter," they said. "Kinda wild, but harmless. Just don't take anything he says too seriously." I'd laughed it off then. But as I stood in the kitchen a few hours later, watching him chug orange juice straight from the carton, still shirtless, still unapologetically comfortable in his own skin, I started to understand what they meant. He was loud in the way confident people are. Not arrogant exactly, just unbothered by the idea of shrinking himself. He told jokes like we were old friends, wandered around in nothing but basketball shorts, and always seemed to be in the middle of some half-finished story about the gym or his job at the boxing studio. "You do cardio?" he asked the first night, halfway through microwaving 2 frozen burritos. "Not really." "Cool. You'll probably live longer that way." He winked like he'd just said something profound. We ate on the couch. He had his legs stretched out like it was his own personal throne, and I took the corner, careful not to let my knee brush his. The TV played something loud and forgettable, but I wasn't really watching it. I kept sneaking glances at him. The ease of his posture, the way he laughed with his whole chest, the way he didn't seem to care what anyone thought. Over the next few days, we settled into a routine. He left early for work and came back smelling like sweat and sandalwood, hair tousled from his motorcycle helmet. He always made enough eggs for 2, always left the bathroom door slightly ajar when he showered. Not on purpose, he was just like that. Casual, effortless, oblivious, maybe. One morning I walked in to grab something from under the sink and froze. Steam poured out from the bathroom, fogging up the mirror, and Kyle stepped out of the shower wearing nothing but a towel slung dangerously low on his hips. "Oh, hey man," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Didn't see you there." I muttered something and turned away quickly. My face burned, and I wasn't sure why. Actually, I just wasn't ready to admit it. Kept happening. Not on purpose, or at least I didn't think so. He'd walk around half-dressed, collapse on the couch after workouts in shorts that barely clung to his thighs, stretch his arms above his head and groan like he'd forgotten anyone else was in the room. He wasn't flirting, I told myself. He was just Kyle. That's how he was. Still, it did something to me. Not just attraction, though, yeah, that was part of it, but the space he occupied. The freedom. I envied it. I hadn't grown up in a world where you could be that unguarded. And every time he walked past in a towel or called me dude with that lazy grin, it chipped away at something in me I didn't know was still there. We talked more than I expected. At night, we'd hang out in the living room, trading stories from our day, eating leftovers or ordering pizza. Kyle talked with his hands, like every sentence needed space. I liked listening to him, even when he went on long tangents about gym clients or random podcast episodes. "You ever think about just disappearing?" he asked once, lying flat on the floor with a slice of pizza balanced on his chest. "Like running away?" "No, like not running. Just starting over. Being someone else somewhere new." I thought about that for a long time. Maybe that's what I was already doing. Then came the gym. Kyle had a guest pass and insisted I come with him. I agreed mostly because I didn't know how to say no without sounding awkward. He was in his element there, greeting trainers with bro hugs, offering tips to strangers, lifting like it was second nature. I tried to keep up, but I was mostly focused on not falling off the treadmill. Afterward, he handed me a water bottle and grinned. "You've got potential," he said, nudging my shoulder. "Maybe I'll train you." "You think I need training?" "Not for the gym. For life, dude. You're way too polite." It was meant to be a joke. I laughed, but his hand lingered on my shoulder just a moment longer than it had to. Later that night, I replayed that second in my head. The contact, the smile, the look in his eyes, amused, yes, but something else underneath. Curious, maybe. Or was I imagining that? I told myself he was just teasing, but deep down I wasn't sure anymore. The first few weeks passed in an easy rhythm, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. Kyle and I had fallen into a pattern that looked almost domestic from the outside. Two guys sharing coffee in the morning, complaining about the price of groceries, arguing about which streaming service had the better documentaries. But beneath the casual routine there was something. A pulse that didn't belong to ordinary friendship. Kyle was still the same, comfortable in his own skin, maybe too comfortable. He'd come home from the gym and strip off his shirt before tossing it into the hamper, wandering into the kitchen half-dressed, humming along to whatever song was stuck in his head. Sometimes he'd stop beside me at the table, phone in hand, leaning close so I could see whatever video he wanted to show. His shoulder would brush mine. His breath would ghost against my cheek when he laughed. I kept pretending it didn't affect me. When he laughed, it wasn't quiet. It came from deep in his chest, filling the room, pulling me in before I realized it. I started to notice details, the way his hair curled slightly when damp, the faint smell of soap and sweat that clung to him after workouts, the soft scrape of his stubble when he rubbed his jaw. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. Admiration, that's all, I told myself. You can admire someone. You can find them magnetic without it being attraction. Still, I caught myself standing in the doorway more than once, watching him from a distance as he did something completely ordinary, like tying his shoes or scrolling on his phone. Ordinary, yet somehow impossible to look away from. One night, he was sprawled across the couch watching a nature documentary. The narrator's voice droned about migration patterns while Kyle absent-mindedly stretched his arms behind his head, exposing a line of tan skin above his waistband. "You good?" he asked, catching me staring. "Yeah, just tired." He grinned. "Tired or hypnotized?" I rolled my eyes, but my ears burned. "Don't flatter yourself." He laughed, then patted the couch cushion next to him. "Come on, watch this. The way these birds navigate is wild." I sat down, not too close, but not far enough either. The glow from the TV flickered across his face, and for a second our eyes met. Something about that small moment felt heavier than it should have, like we both noticed the same quiet shift but decided to pretend we hadn't. Days blurred. We found ourselves sharing more pieces of life than I'd expected. Grocery lists, inside jokes, playlists. The boundary between roommate and friend became thin, translucent. Then came that late-night conversation, the kind that only happens when the city's asleep and the lights are low. It was just past midnight. We'd finished watching some mindless action movie and were sitting in the dim kitchen light, each with a glass of water instead of the beer we pretended we didn't need. Kyle looked tired, his hair sticking up from the couch cushion, his voice softer than usual. "You ever feel like everything's moving too fast?" he asked. "Like everyone else is figuring it out, and you're just catching up?" "Most days," I admitted. He nodded, eyes fixed on the counter. "People think I've got it together because I'm loud. Truth is, it's easier to joke than to admit you're lonely." The honesty in his tone startled me. Kyle never said things like that. I didn't know what to say, so I told him the truth. "Yeah, me too." He looked up, and for a heartbeat the air felt different, quiet, fragile. Then he smirked, breaking the tension. "Guess that makes us two lonely dudes with terrible sleep schedules." I laughed, grateful for the return of humor. "Speak for yourself." "I'm thriving." "Sure you are." He grinned, but his eyes stayed thoughtful. We talked for another hour about everything and nothing. College stories, bad dates, the weirdest clients he'd trained. Somewhere between the jokes, the loneliness we'd both confessed hung in the air like an unspoken agreement. We understood each other more than we admitted. When he finally stood to head to bed, he clapped me on the shoulder. "Don't overthink it, man. Life's just reps and rest days. You'll get stronger. Is that a gym metaphor for feelings? He laughed. Everything's a gym metaphor if you try hard enough. The next morning, the tension had shifted again. Not heavier, just realer. He was making oatmeal, stirring the pot with a wooden spoon. You know, he said casually, I'm supposed to track my progress this month for a fitness challenge. Need to do measurements and all that. Measurements, I echoed. Yeah. He smirked. You can help me if you want. You look like you'd be precise with numbers. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. I think I'll pass. Ah, come on. It's science. Science doesn't need witnesses. I shot back, which made him laugh so hard he nearly spilled the oatmeal. He kept teasing me about it all day, calling me professor, and asking if I'd bring a clipboard. Every time he said it, my pulse jumped a little, though I pretended to be annoyed. It was a harmless joke, I told myself. Just Kyle being Kyle. But that night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop hearing his laugh echoing in my head. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything starting. That night, the joke stayed with me longer than it should have. The apartment was quiet that evening, the kind of soft quiet that only comes after a long day. I'd been on the couch for the last hour, lost in some documentary I wasn't even really watching. My thoughts kept drifting, looping back to the same point. Kyle's joke from the morning. Help me measure, he'd said. Simple. Silly. But the look in his eyes had lingered too long, and the laugh had carried something beneath it. Something I didn't know how to name. The door opened with a thud. I didn't even need to look. I knew it was him from the sound of the keys hitting the counter, the weight of his gym bag being dropped by the kitchen door. Smells like takeout and existential dread, Kyle called, his voice teasing as he peeled off his hoodie. You good? I muted the TV. Surviving. He wandered in, towel around his neck, shirt clinging to his chest with post-workout sweat. His skin glistened faintly under the hallway light, and the usual scent of heat, deodorant, and something vaguely citrusy followed him. Productive gym session? I asked, trying to keep my eyes on his face. Oh, you know me, he said, reaching into the fridge. One step closer to becoming a superhero. He twisted open a bottle of water, took a long drink, then turned and smiled. Speaking of which, here it comes. He reached into the side pocket of his gym bag and pulled out a small tape measure. It was the retractable kind, the sort used by tailors and fitness coaches. He held it up between two fingers like a trophy. My trainer said I need updated measurements for this month's challenge, he said. Wanna help? I blinked. Seriously? He shrugged, already amused. What? You don't trust me to do it straight? I don't know if I trust me to do it straight, I muttered, mostly to myself. He grinned like he'd caught it anyway. Come on, man. Shoulders, chest, arms. Easy stuff. Strictly science. I sat up slowly. You want me to measure your body? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds way more dramatic than it is, he said, walking over and tossing the tape measure onto the coffee table. Think of it as a trust exercise. I stared at the small coil of plastic and metal, now lying innocently beside the remote. Shouldn't have been a big deal. People did this all the time. Trainers, doctors, tailors, friends. But we weren't exactly just friends anymore, were we? All right, I said finally, standing up. Let's get this over with before I overthink it. He laughed and started tugging off his gym shirt. That's the spirit. I kept my eyes on the tape, but I could feel the shift in the air, the kind of weight that gathers in a room when something unspoken hangs between two people. Kyle stood in front of me, bare-chested now, arms relaxed, waiting. I picked up the tape measure and tried to keep my hands steady. Shoulders first, he said, his tone casual, but his gaze stayed on my face. From one end to the other. I moved in closer, the plastic tape stretching across his broad back. His skin was warm beneath my fingers. I tried not to notice how easily he breathed, like none of this felt strange. What's the number? He asked. 21.5. Respectable, he said, grinning. Next was his chest. I hesitated. He raised an eyebrow. You okay? Yeah. Just trying to remember how to do this properly. He stepped forward. Want me to hold it in place? Before I could answer, his hand was over mine, guiding the tape gently across the center of his chest. His palm rested lightly on mine, just long enough to make me forget what I was doing. Cleared my throat. Okay, that's 42 and a quarter. Progress, he said. See? You're good at this. We went through shoulders, chest, biceps, all while trying to keep things light. We cracked jokes. We laughed. I tried not to focus on the way his body moved or how close he stood. But the moment came when all the noise fell away. It was just after I'd finished measuring his waist. He stood there, arms at his sides, watching me wind the tape back up. He didn't smile this time. He didn't joke. Instead, he asked quietly, "Does this make you uncomfortable?" I looked up. His expression was open, not teasing, not smug. Just curious. Honest. I swallowed. A little. Kyle nodded slowly, eyes never leaving mine. Why? I hesitated. Then I said it softly, but clearly. Not for the reason you think. A long silence passed between us. Something shifted in his eyes. Not surprise, exactly. More like understanding. Like some invisible barrier between us had finally cracked. He didn't press me. He didn't ask for more. He just nodded again. Slowly. Okay, he said. Thanks for helping. I nodded too. Yeah, anytime. We both stood there in the middle of the room, like we weren't quite sure what came next. He picked up his shirt but didn't put it on. I sat back down but didn't turn the TV back on. Eventually, Kyle spoke again. Hey, you know I joke around a lot, but I don't want to make you feel weird. You didn't, I said. Not really. I guess I didn't expect things to feel this complicated. He offered the smallest smile. Yeah, me neither. We didn't talk about it anymore that night. He went to shower. I sat in the quiet, the tape measure still in my hand, curled up like a secret. We both laughed again when he came out, towel over his shoulders, joking about protein shakes and cheat days. But this time, the laughter sounded different. Softer. Closer. Almost like relief. The next few days passed like shadows moving across a wall. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt quite right. Kyle and I still crossed paths in the apartment. We still shared coffee, still argued over which movie to watch, still laughed at dumb memes on our phones. But underneath the normalcy, something quieter had taken root. We weren't talking about what had happened. Not directly. Not the measuring. Not the way our hands brushed. Not the silence that settled in afterward like a blanket no one wanted to fold. Kyle hadn't changed anything obvious. He still walked around shirtless, still ruffled my hair when he passed behind the couch. But the easy jokes had thinned out. His touches were lighter, less frequent, like he was trying to figure out if I needed space, or if he did. I wasn't sure myself. The quiet wasn't hostile, just heavy. It filled the air between us like static, like waiting for a song to drop but never quite knowing when. One night, I found myself staring at the tape measure still sitting on the bookshelf, coiled up like a memory I hadn't decided how to process. I hadn't moved it. Neither had he. The moment replayed in my head more than I wanted to admit. His voice, softer than usual, asking me if I was uncomfortable. My own answer, raw and too close to something I hadn't put words to yet. Not for the reason you think. I didn't regret helping him. I didn't even regret the closeness. What I wrestled with wasn't the act. It was what it meant. Why I felt seen, nervous, drawn in and exposed at the same time. Was it attraction? Curiosity? Admiration? Was I just lonely? Was he? I thought about the way Kyle had looked at me. Not cocky, not smug, just vulnerable. And I wondered if he was asking something else underneath his words. Something I'd almost heard, but couldn't quite reach. He seemed quieter, too. Less of his usual bravado. More time spent with headphones in, head leaned against the window, staring out at the street as if the world beyond the glass had more answers than I did. It all came to a head the following Thursday. We were both home earlier than usual. The weather had turned, and the rain beat down against the windows in slow, steady rhythms. I was curled up with a blanket and a book I wasn't reading. Kyle was in the kitchen, his back to me as he rinsed out a mug. Without turning around, he spoke. "You've been weird lately." I looked up. "Excuse me?" He turned then, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, brow furrowed in a way that didn't look angry, just confused. "You've been, I don't know, quiet, careful, like I'm going to explode or something." I hesitated, searching for the right words. "You've been quiet too?" "Yeah, well," he said, exhaling. I didn't want to push anything. I sat up, heart knocking harder than I expected. "Push what?" He shrugged. "I don't know. A boundary? An expectation? You tell me." There was a beat of silence. Then another. "I've been thinking about it," I admitted. "That night." "Me too." I looked at him, really looked. At the man who had always carried himself like nothing could shake him. But right now he looked unsure. Human. "I didn't feel weird because of what we did," I said quietly. "It was more about how it made me feel. I wasn't ready for it to feel that close." Kyle nodded slowly. "Yeah, same." We let the quiet sit between us again. This time less heavy, more honest. "I wasn't messing with you," he added after a moment. "If that's what you thought. I wasn't trying to make you uncomfortable." "I know you weren't," I said. "I think that's why it threw me off. You were just being real, and I wasn't expecting that." He scratched the back of his neck, something he only did when he was nervous. "I guess I joke too much because it's easier than admitting I don't always know what I'm doing. With people, especially people I trust." The words sat between us like a candle flickering in a dark room. "I didn't regret it," I said finally. "I just didn't expect it to mean something." His eyes flicked to mine. "And now, I still don't know what it means," I said honestly. "But I know I don't want to pretend it didn't happen." He exhaled, this time with something softer in his expression. Not relief exactly, but recognition. Like we'd both been carrying something we didn't have the language for, and now we were finally starting to spell it out. "I don't want to go back to pretending either," he said. "But I also don't want to screw up whatever this is. Living together. You're easy to be around. In a way I didn't think I needed." That made something shift in my chest. Something small and warm. "I feel the same," I said. We didn't declare anything. We didn't define it. But we sat down together in the living room that night. Close, not touching, sharing silence without fear. We talked about small things. Movies, music, plans for the weekend. But underneath it all, the subtext was no longer silence. It was shared space, mutual trust, a slow breath between one chapter ending and another beginning. When I got up to head to bed, Kyle looked over at me and said, "Hey, thanks for not being weird about it." I smiled. We were both weird, but maybe that's okay. He laughed, just once. A real laugh, unguarded. "It wasn't about what we did," I said quietly as I turned toward the hallway. "It was about what it meant." There comes a point in silence when it's no longer peaceful, just heavy. A waiting room where words pace the floor, looking for a way out. That's what the next few days felt like. Kyle and I were talking again, yes, laughing even, but underneath every conversation was a question neither of us had answered. What are we now? Friends? Something else? Something neither of us had expected but both of us were clearly circling? It all came to a head on a rainy Sunday night. The city outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that wraps around buildings like fog. I was sitting on the couch, nursing a cup of tea I didn't really want, flicking through a book I couldn't focus on. Kyle came in wearing one of his oversized hoodies, his damp hair pushed back from a shower. He flopped down next to me, closer than usual, but not quite touching. We sat like that for a while. The only sound was the occasional drip of rain against the windowsill. Eventually, I closed my book. "Kyle," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "Yeah, I need to say something, and I might stumble through it, but can I just try?" He looked over at me, and his expression softened instantly. "Of course." I took a breath. "I don't really know what this is between us," I said slowly. "I don't even know what I'm feeling half the time." But I know it's more than just the jokes. Or the measuring thing. Or whatever all of that was. I don't want to lose this, you. But I also don't want to pretend like I'm not feeling something real. He didn't respond right away. I kept going. I've spent most of my life keeping things simple. Controlled. And you've turned all of that inside out without even trying. And the worst part is, I don't mind. I think I even like it. I just don't know what to do with it yet. There. It was out. I braced myself for a joke. A deflection. A shrug. But Kyle didn't laugh. He just looked down at his hands for a second before letting out a long, quiet breath. I'm really glad you said that, he said finally. Because I've been feeling the same way. For weeks. My heart thudded. I didn't know how to bring it up without making it weird, he continued. And honestly, all that teasing, the measuring, the jokes, it was a dumb way to figure out if you'd ever look at me differently. Not my finest move, I know. I blinked. Wait. You wanted me to look? He laughed softly, the sound tinged with nerves. Yeah, it wasn't just a joke, Matt. I didn't want to make you uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to just say it. That I like you. That being around you feels different. The words hung in the air between us. Quiet, but enormous. You like me? I repeated just to be sure I hadn't misheard. Kyle smiled, almost shy. Yeah. And not just in a you're cool to live with kind of way. I stared at him, trying to match the version of Kyle I thought I knew. Confident, effortless, untouchable, with the one sitting next to me now. Open. Vulnerable. Human. And somehow that version meant more. We both looked down at our laps for a moment, the couch cushion between us suddenly feeling like the bridge across a canyon. I don't want to rush this, I said. He nodded. Neither do I. I'm still figuring myself out. Same. The room was so quiet we could hear the shift of the building as the wind picked up outside. Then, quietly, slowly, Kyle reached out and let his hand brush against mine. Not a grab. Not a move. Just a soft slide of skin against skin. A pause. A question without words. I didn't pull away. I didn't lean in either. I just let it happen. The warmth of his fingers was more grounding than anything I'd felt in weeks. Maybe months. We sat like that for a long time. Neither of us saying anything. Just being. And that was enough. We didn't make plans. We didn't assign labels or set timelines. But we made something better. An agreement, unspoken but understood. To be honest. To be careful. To see where this could go without fear, without pressure. Later, as we finished a movie we didn't care about, our hands still resting side by side, Kyle said, I used to think I had to be bold about everything. Loud. Sure. Always first to speak. And now? I asked. He smiled, eyes on the screen. Now I think silence can mean something too. I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because I was finally learning that not every moment needed to be filled. Some just needed to be shared. No one kissed. No one needed to. The silence said enough. It's strange how life doesn't announce its most important changes. There's no trumpet, no flashing sign. Sometimes, it's just two people standing in a kitchen, bumping shoulders while chopping vegetables. Sometimes, it's laughter echoing in a hallway that once held tension. Sometimes, it's just a look, softer than before, more certain. Weeks had passed since that night on the couch. The one with no kiss, no declarations. Just quiet truth and a hand that didn't need to hold. Only touch. Kyle and I never sat down to define anything. No big talk, no labels. Just moments. And moments were enough. We found a rhythm. Not one we planned, but one we fell into like stepping into warm water. I'd wake up to the smell of eggs and hot sauce. He always cooked too much, claiming it was for leftovers. Even though we both knew he just liked sharing. I'd make the coffee, careful with how he liked it. 2 sugars, splash of oat milk, always in the green mug with the chip near the handle. Sometimes we'd run together in the mornings. Headphones in, no words, just matching strides and shared silence. Other days, we'd work separately in our rooms and meet in the kitchen by instinct, magnetized by hunger or boredom or each other. The house felt different now. Lighter. Kyle was softer in small ways. Not less himself, just less guarded. He still joked, still flexed after workouts, still walked around barefoot and half-dressed. But now, the humor didn't feel like armor. Felt like invitation. Once, I caught him standing in front of the mirror, frowning at his reflection. Progress check. I teased. He looked over his shoulder. I think I peaked last week. You missed it. Damn, I said. Guess I'll just have to keep an eye on the decline. He threw a towel at me, laughing. Later that night, we shared a couch blanket without comment. His head rested on the back cushion. Mine leaned toward his shoulder, and the world just faded. We weren't trying to be anything. We were just being. I used to analyze every interaction, replay moments in my head like film clips, wondering if I was misreading something. But now it felt okay not to have every answer, because the questions didn't feel scary anymore. One Sunday morning, the city was wrapped in light, the kind that spills through the blinds and turns everything gold. Kyle was already in the kitchen, barefoot, humming something off-key. I stood in the doorway for a minute before he noticed me, watching the way the sunlight caught his jaw, the curve of his smile as he poured coffee into 2 mugs. He looked up. Hey, I said. We sat by the window, mugs warm in our hands, the air still with early morning quiet. Outside, a bird hopped along the balcony railing. Inside, the silence between us felt full, not empty. His hand was resting on the table beside mine, close, not touching. I reached out and rested my fingers on top of his. Lightly, just enough. He looked down at our hands, then up at me. You're different in the mornings, he said. How so? Quieter, softer. Maybe it's just you seeing me clearly. He smiled at that. I like the view. We didn't move for a while, just sat like that, hands touching, the day beginning around us. I thought back to how all of this started. A joke. Tape measure. A question that seemed so absurd at the time it almost didn't register. Do you think I have a big? It had been ridiculous. And real. And the start of something we didn't even realize was beginning. I looked at him now, same Kyle. Same grin, same stubborn confidence, same easy swagger. But also not the same. Because somewhere in those quiet moments we'd both changed. Or maybe we just stopped pretending. He leaned back in his chair and let out a sigh. You ever think about how weird this all is? All the time. I mean, if someone had told me a couple months ago that I'd be drinking coffee with my roommate, fingers intertwined, semi-flirting at 8 in the morning, I'd have said they were high. I laughed. Same. And yet, he said, squeezing my hand just once. Here we are. I nodded. Here we are. We didn't need more than that. Not yet. Maybe never. Because the laughter, the softness, the ordinary intimacy, was already more than enough. We finished our coffee slowly, watching the light shift across the floor. He once asked me to measure something stupid. In the end, it was my own heart that came up short, until he filled the rest. If the story touched you, don't forget to give it a like. It really helps the channel grow. And tell me in the comments. Have you ever felt something unexpected for someone close, but didn't know how to put it into words? If you enjoyed this kind of emotional, slow-burn romance, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. We've got more heartfelt stories coming every week.